Hello and welcome to the interview on France 24. Are Europe and the US suffering from the same woes? Well, the inability of lawmakers on both sides of the Atlantic to agree on how to heal their nation's finances has sent shockwaves through the markets. The towering debt crisis has revealed rifts between EU member states and has further polarized America's political elite. My guest today is the US ambassador to the European Union, William Kennett. Mr. Kennett, thank you very much for joining us from Brussels. I add, as I can see on the panel just behind you, that an US-EU summit will take place in Washington on November 28th. This will be, of course, an opportunity for President Obama to talk to his European counterparts. But let's start, if you want, with the situation back home. The US Congress has basically admitted defeat after failing to agree on a reduction of the deficit by $1.2 trillion. Who's to blame for the current deadlock in the United States?
Well, you know, I try to avoid playing the blame game here. Obviously, it's a serious situation. Our president is working very hard to try to move ahead with a package of legislation which will help Americans get back to work. That's the most pressing problem we face, is to get our economy growing so that we can get people back to work. And obviously, we're very focused on this, but our president is going to do everything he can to try to preserve and expand this fragile recovery that we have.
But surely this is sending a very negative signal to the markets, the lack of compromise on the crucial debt issue.
Well, certainly we're all disappointed that our politics have become so polarized in the United States. But we just can't remain paralyzed. We've got to move ahead. And so the president has announced very forcefully that he's going to do everything he can, notwithstanding this very difficult political environment, to bring forth to Congress and ultimately to the American people a package of proposals so that we can move ahead and get people back to work.
Mr. Ambassador, let's move back to Europe. How worried are you that the current Eurozone crisis could lead to a repeat of 29? We've heard that opinion from some experts recently.
Well, of course, I don't want to be overly dramatic here. As our president has said, this is a very serious situation. He has been very engaged with European leaders to offer advice and counsel based on some of our experiences and the depths of our financial crisis, liquidity crisis that we had in 2008 and 2009. But ultimately, we believe that this is a crisis that Europe must solve on its own. We believe Europe has the resources, the wherewithal to solve it, and we're trying to be as helpful as we can. But obviously, we don't have a vote. This is a decision that European leaders will have to make on their own. There are some crucial decision points coming up. I'm sure this will be discussed at the US-EU summit coming up, and there's a very important European Council meeting in December. So obviously, this will be a primary focus of discussion.
When you say that this is a crisis that Europe has to solve by itself, does it mean that the US isn't committed to help Europe financially? We know that Europe has set up a stability fund, the EFSF, and it's willing to ask the emerging countries, but also the United States, to contribute.
Well, our leaders have made clear that we'll be supportive, but we're working through the IMF, where we are a major contributor there, and we're working through our participation in the G20. But beyond that, we believe that Europe has the wherewithal to deal with this crisis on its own.
So no participation in the EFSF so far?
Oh, no.
Now, let's move on to another story, of course. It's the role of the European Central Bank. Would you like to see the European Central Bank turn into some kind of Fed? I mean, thereby to become a lender of last resort, which isn't the case so far.
Well, again, this is a decision that Europe will have to make. We don't have a vote in this matter. Our experience is different. Our Fed works differently. It has a different mandate, and so we've used it differently. But the ECB is a different institution, has different governance, and Europe will decide how and when to use the ECB.
Mr. Kennard, the Europeans have met several times since the beginning of the crisis. They have adopted several plans. So far, they haven't fully delivered. Has the response, in your view, been too timid?
Well, our president has been very clear in answering this question. He has said that he would like to see Europe move more decisively and put a more substantial package of resources in place, what he calls a firewall against a further financial crisis. And obviously, we'd like to see more decisive implementation of these plans. Europeans would as well, but we're also sensitive, as the president has said, to the political structure in Europe. It's difficult for them to be as decisive given their structure. So we have privately offered our support and advice on this matter. The president has been very, very engaged with his counterparts in Europe and will continue to be as Europe works through this crisis.
Now, France, Germany and the European Commission are willing to introduce a tax on financial transactions. There is a bit of frustration in Brussels that the idea hasn't been taken fully seriously by the US. Has your position changed on the so-called Tobin tax?
No, our position has not changed. This is not something that we advocate. We don't think that it is the right direction to go in. And we will continue to be engaged with European leaders to express that point of view.
But Europeans will tell you the crisis started from the banks, and therefore it's only normal that the banks will start contributing as well.
Well, that's only one of many solutions to ensure that we have a healthy functioning bank system. There are other ways that are being implemented to require higher capital requirements of banks. There are other approaches here. Just because we do not favor the financial transactions tax doesn't mean that we're not in favor and indeed have implemented other measures to deal with the banking crisis that we ourselves experienced in the United States.
The US recently lost its AAA rating. France could be next. Do you believe that credit rating agencies have too much power?
No, I mean, this is an issue that was dealt with in our financial reform legislation, the so-called Dodd-Frank legislation. We dealt with this issue, and we think that, at least in our system, we have fully addressed this problem. And of course, we're watching carefully what Europe is doing, but my own personal view is that the credit ratings agencies are not the complete problem here.
So you don't welcome the works of the Commission, of Commissioner Barnier, who's trying to rein in the power of these credit rating agencies?
Well, I think the member states of Europe have certainly conveyed to Mr. Barnier and others that his approach was a little bit too aggressive, and as I understand it, the Commission is taking a slightly different approach itself.
You said that Europe has to erect a firewall. Could Eurobonds be part of the solution?
Some people think so. You know, there are a lot of good solutions that are being proffered. The Commission has just come up with a proposal on Eurobonds. It's not the only way to go. We have weighed in on some of these ideas, but again, it's really not helpful for us to publicly convey our suggestions here. You know, part of the problem with this crisis is that everyone's got a solution, and you know, the real issue here is can Europe coalesce around a single solution and then implement it? And so I'm not going to add my voice to the multiple solutions out there, certainly not in this forum.
Mr. Ambassador, mostly all governments in Europe have rushed to adopt austerity plans. Part of the problem, though, is that this has emasculated growth across Europe. Has it been a mistake?
Well, you know, every country is going to do what they think is in their best interest. We in the United States are also struggling with coming up with the right balance between austerity and stimulus. It's different in various countries given the circumstance. Our view is that you have to be careful in imposing too much austerity because we've seen concrete examples where it can cut off growth. So getting that balance right is very, very important.
And one last question about the situation in your country, the US. The Occupy Wall Street movement has grabbed headlines across Europe. There's a lot of interest for what's going on in the US. A situation which would have been unthinkable a couple of years ago. What is your view on this?
Well, look, we're 4 years into the most serious financial crisis since the Great Depression. People are frustrated, they're angry, and this is one way that they've been able to express their concerns in a very dramatic way. As our president has said, he fully understands the feelings that these people have, and the thing that we have to do in government is to work as hard as we can to implement solutions to make their lives better. That's the solution here. That's what the Obama administration is working hard to do, and I know leaders in Europe are also very focused on trying to make changes so that they can get people back to work and so that their lives improve. That's the fundamental issue we all face.
William Kennard, US Ambassador to the European Union, thank you very much for talking to us. And thank you for watching this edition of The Interview on France 24. Please stay tuned for more news on our channel.